It is the 12th day before the calends of October in the year 870 ab urbe condita. By modern reckoning, September of 117 CE. The heat of the high summer has faded, leaving Rome wrapped in a gentle, early autumn coolness. A pale wash of light is just beginning to brush the eastern sky beyond the Capitoline Hill, and in the shadows, the city still holds the damp chill of night. Over the Tiber, a faint mist clings to the slow-moving water, veiling the moored barges in ghostly outlines. The air is layered with scents, the sweetness of figs recently unloaded from the provinces, the briny tang of fish packed in amphorae from Ostia, the lingering smoke of charcoal braziers banked low through the night. The empire is vast, stretched from the Atlantic coast of Hispania to the deserts of Arabia, from the wild northern forests along the Danube to the deep harbors of Alexandria. Only weeks ago, the beloved Emperor Trajan died far from Rome, in Cilicia, on the road back from his eastern campaigns. His chosen successor, or so the Senate has been told, is Publius Aelius Hadrianus, a man of Iberian origin, educated in Greek letters, known for both his soldier's discipline and his taste for philosophy and art. Word spreads in fragments. Some speak of his skill in law, others of his cautious withdrawal from the edges of war. Across the provinces, governors and legates weigh what this new reign will bring. In the capital, the political heart beats steadily. Senators in their grand houses prepare for the coming session. Merchants anticipate fresh decrees that may shift trade. Priests ready their temples for public vows to the new ruler. Farther afield, Rome's legions hold the borders, in Britannia, in Judea, in Dacia, each cohort a living strand in the web that binds the empire together. Here in the city, though, the concerns are immediate and tangible. The grain ships from Africa must be unloaded before the sun grows hot. The bakers must have their flour. Water must run freely in the aqueduct channels. The forum must be swept before the day's business begins. The streets themselves are still. Only the occasional footstep of an early rising slave or the creak of a cartwheel breaks the hush. But already the city is poised to awaken, each district ready to take up its role in the daily rhythm. From sunrise to sunset, this day in Rome will unfurl in 1,000 small moments, each threaded into the vast tapestry of Hadrian's new rule. The first glimmer of the sun slides over the Capitoline Hill, turning the Tiber's surface from slate grey to a slow-moving ribbon of gold. Along the embankments, dock workers rouse themselves from blankets thrown over coils of rope, shaking off the last of the night's cool damp. Their tunics are short, practical, and stained from years of labour. Undyed wool for some, coarse linen for others. A few knot strips of cloth around their heads to keep sweat and hair from their eyes. The smell of wet hemp and tar from mooring lines hangs thick in the air, mingling with the sharper scent of river mud as men wade knee-deep to guide the barges in. 2 large vessels have arrived in the dark hours before dawn, their hulls low in the water from the weight of their cargo. From one comes the distinctive aroma of Egyptian grain, dry, dusty, faintly sweet, spilling from sacks hoisted on poles to the waiting carts above. From the other drifts, the pungent scent of garum amphorae, sealed in pitch and bound for the markets of the Subura and Esquiline. The dockmasters, wearing dark-dyed cloaks to mark their authority, call out the tally in clear-clipped Latin, scratching figures into wax tablets with styluses. Gulls wheel overhead, their cries sharp and insistent, diving close when a fish crate is momentarily left open. On the far side of the river, faint plumes of smoke rise from early cooking fires in the Transtiberum district, the silhouettes of tenements and tiled roofs sharpening against the brightening sky. A water seller pushes his cart along the wharf, the small bronze cups rattling softly. He'll be the first to offer the workers a drink once the lifting is done. From the higher road leading toward the Forum Boreum, the rumble of approaching ox carts grows louder. They come from the southern gates, their wheels thick with dust from the Via Ostiensis, bringing produce from the port at Ostia. The sun clears the horizon fully now, glinting on the bronze fittings of the cart yokes, and the day begins to draw its first breath in earnest. The steady pulse of a city whose life is tied to the flow of this wide brown river. The Subura, Rome's most densely packed district, wakes not in a single moment, but in ripples. A door creaks open here, a voice calls out there. The clatter of a wooden bucket follows. The alleys are narrow, hemmed in by tall insulae whose upper floors lean toward each other like old neighbors in conversation. Overnight, the stones have held the cool of the autumn air, but beneath them is the faint, lingering musk of yesterday's heat, cooking smoke, and the crush of too many bodies in too small a space. Bakers are among the first to stir. Behind heavy shutters, the glow of their ovens leaks into the darkened lanes, carrying with it the yeasty warmth of rising loaves. In one shop, a boy no older than 10 pumps the bellows, sending sparks into the dim rafters, while his master kneads dough with practiced rhythmic pressure. Across the street, a woman scatters grain for a handful of scrawny chickens that scratch at the grit, their feathers ruffling in the soft morning breeze. The sounds are a layering of lives. The muted slap of sandals against damp cobbles, the muffled exchange of coins as a milk seller makes his rounds, the distant bark of a dog penned on a rooftop terrace. Somewhere deeper in the tangle, the clang of a pail echoes as it strikes the lip of a public fountain. Water splashes into amphorae bound for the upper floors where no aqueduct reaches. Slaves in plain wool tunics hurry along with errands. To fetch bread, to deliver messages, to secure a place in the queue for fresh fish before the markets crowd. Above, laundry left overnight sways gently on lines strung between buildings, catching the first pale light as the sun threads into the streets. A pair of young men in short-dyed cloaks pass by, speaking in low voices about news from the Forum. Rumors of new appointments in the Imperial Guard, of foreign envoys expected before midday. The Subura has a reputation for noise and vice, but in this early hour it hums at a softer pitch, its people not yet jostling, but simply moving into the day. The smell of baking bread and damp stone rises together, carrying the promise of warmth as the sun begins its slow climb above the rooftops. Beyond the press of the Subura, on the quieter slopes of the Palatine, the morning unfolds at a different pace. In the peristyle of a patrician domus, the air is scented with laurel and myrtle from neatly kept planters. The marble paving underfoot still holds the cool of the night, while in the center a small fountain murmurs, sending droplets in a fine mist over the leaves of a potted fig tree. Sunlight advances slowly across the painted walls, illuminating scenes of gods and heroes in deep vermilion and ochre. Inside, the household is already in motion. Slaves move in practiced silence, their bare feet whispering against polished floors. In the atrium, a young steward checks the day's list of tasks etched into a wax tablet. Fresh bread from the Subura baker, flowers for the Lararium shrine, and a message to be sent to a senator's residence regarding the afternoon's dinner. From the Collina, the warm aroma of spiced honey cakes drifts in. The cook is preparing the morning's light meal for the lady of the house: figs, bread, and watered wine. The domina herself sits by a window draped with gauze, hair being dressed by a skilled maid who twists and pins it into the elaborate waves favored by the fashionable. She wears a soft stola of pale blue, cinched with a woven belt, its hem brushing against sandals of fine leather. On a low table beside her rests a small scroll of poetry, a Greek text she will read later in the gardens when the sun grows higher. In the tablinum, the master of the house confers quietly with his secretary, reviewing correspondence received the previous evening. There is a letter from a cousin in Ostia reporting on a delay in a shipment of marble, and another from a client seeking legal counsel. He adjusts the folds of his white tunic and reaches for a signet ring to seal a reply. From the street beyond the high wall, the faint sounds of the city filter in. A vendor's distant call, the rumble of a cart. But within, the order of the morning is deliberate and unhurried. Here, the day is shaped first by ritual, then by duty, the rhythm of privilege set apart from the restless stir of Rome's common quarters. As the sun lifts above the Capitoline Hill, the heart of Rome begins to quicken. The Forum Romanum, still mottled with long shadows from its colonnades, is already dotted with figures moving between its marble spaces. The paving stones, worn smooth by centuries of feet, are cool beneath the sandals of early arrivals, clerks with armfuls of scrolls, merchants staking out corners near the Basilica Aemilia, and orators rehearsing under their breath beside the rostra. The scent of damp stone mingles with that of fresh-cut herbs carried in baskets from the nearby markets. Temple doors stand open to the morning, their bronze fittings catching the light. From the temple of Castor and Pollux drifts the faint perfume of incense. Inside, a pair of priests adjust their white-bordered togas before stepping out to bless a delegation from the provinces. At the far end, the curia's great doors are unbarred, and the murmur of senatorial aides arranging benches is just audible. A public scribe unrolls a waxed board near the comitium, posting fresh announcements of imperial decrees. This morning's notices include a call for skilled stonemasons for a new aqueduct repair, and a reminder of the next public games scheduled at the Circus Maximus. Passers-by pause to scan the words, heads tilting, lips moving as they trace the lines. Along the porticoes, shopkeepers slide open their wooden shutters. One displays bolts of dyed wool, deep purples for the wealthy, earthy reds and browns for the modest household. Another arranges trays of small bronze figurines, polished until they gleam in the slanting light. A cluster of money changers sets up their low tables, the clink of coin against coin ringing softly as they stack denarii and sesterces. A young orator, perhaps no more than 20, steps up to a column's base and clears his throat. His voice is still tentative as he addresses a gathering of friends and curious strangers on the virtues of the new emperor, weaving careful praise with veiled hope for a stable reign. Nearby, a pair of veterans lean on their walking sticks, muttering to each other about Hadrian's rumored plans to fortify borders rather than expand them. The Forum is not yet at full roar, but it breathes now. A living core where news, commerce, and ambition meet beneath the pale blue sweep of the morning sky. By mid-morning, the first warmth of the sun has settled over the city, drawing a steady trickle of men toward the public baths. At the baths of Titus near the Esquiline, the great arched entrance yawns open, admitting the mingled scents of steam, olive oil, and damp stone. Inside, the light filters down through high clerestory windows, striking motes of dust that drift lazily in the air. A group of older men, their backs straight despite the years, gather in the apoditerium to undress. Their tunics are plain, some patched at the shoulders, but the heavy bronze rings and well-worn caligae betrays their past as soldiers of the legions. They greet each other with clasped forearms and the easy familiarity of comrades who have shared long marches and rough bivouacs. In the tepidarium, steam rises from the warm pool in thin, wavering curtains. The veterans lower themselves into the water with audible sighs, easing the stiffness in joints long abused by armor and cold campaigns. Conversations rise and fall in the echoing chamber. One speaks of his years on the Danube frontier, patrolling in snow so deep it swallowed the wheels of supply carts. Another tells of the Parthian campaign under Trajan, the blinding sun, the dust, the sudden word of the emperor's death. All of them speculate on Hadrian. Some admire his soldier's bearing, others question his rumored caution in foreign policy. A slave with a bronze strigil moves among them, scraping oil and dirt from shoulders and arms before rinsing the skin with warm water. The rhythmic splash of ladles against the pool edges blends with the low hum of voices. From beyond the caldarium comes the faint hiss of water thrown onto hot stones, followed by the heavy, damp heat that drifts into the chamber. Outside in the palaestra, younger men exercise with discus and light weights, their shouts punctuating the steadier sounds within. The veterans watch for a while before dressing again, moving slowly but with dignity. As they step back into the bright courtyard, the noise of the city resumes. Carts on stone, vendors calling. But within the walls of the baths, they have shared a brief sanctuary, a place where the burdens of years are eased by water and memory. In the mid-morning sun, the streets leading from the Forum toward the Theatre of Marcellus draw a different kind of crowd. Here, open spaces between colonnades become impromptu stages, and the air carries the bright tumbling notes of a lute. A young musician, his tunic belted high frieze, plucks quick melodies, nodding in time as coins clink into the small wooden bowl at his feet. Nearby, a painted juggler tosses coloured balls in a smooth arc, the bright wool spheres flashing against the pale stone backdrop. Children gather at the front, their laughter high and unguarded, while older onlookers smile faintly, one hand resting on their purses. The smell of roasting chestnuts drifts from a brazier tended by a vendor, the warm, nutty aroma wrapping itself into the hum of voices. The crowd ebbs and flows as people stop to watch, then move on toward errands or appointments. A man with a trained monkey, dressed in a miniature soldier's tunic, draws attention by having the creature salute passers-by, who drop copper coins into a small leather pouch slung across its chest. Amid the cheer, quieter movements go unnoticed by most. A thin youth in a plain, short tunic weaves through the edges of the gathering, eyes sharp, his path always brushing close to distracted spectators. A sudden shift in his posture marks success. A small purse, now hidden in his hand, quickly slipped beneath the fold of his belt. Further off, two women, one balancing a basket of figs, call out prices in a sing-song rhythm, though their eyes occasionally flick toward the crowd, searching for familiar faces or opportunities. A group of slaves carrying amphorae pause to watch a fire-breather exhale a burst of flame, the sharp scent of singed oil hanging briefly in the air. The applause is genuine, yet within it is the restless turnover of a city where entertainment and caution live side by side. As the juggler bows and the lute falls silent for a moment, the sun shifts across the square, casting long shadows from the porticoes. The crowd thins, leaving behind only the lingering smell of chestnuts, a faint trail of laughter, and the knowledge, for some, that their purses feel lighter than when they stopped. By the time the sun stands well above the rooftops, the open markets are in full sway. The Macellum, with its central fountain splashing into a stone basin, hums with the layered rhythm of voices. Buyers pressing for better prices, sellers countering with practiced firmness. Stalls overflow with the colors and scents of the season. Baskets of pomegranates split open to reveal ruby seeds, neat piles of green and black olives glistening with oil, and heaps of fresh herbs, basil, rue, and fennel, their aromas sharp in the warming air. Fishmongers, their aprons streaked with scales, arrange gleaming catches on beds of damp reeds. The tang of salt water mingles with the deeper, earthy smell of live eels twisting in shallow tubs. From another row drifts the spice merchant's perfume, cinnamon from Arabia, pepper from India, saffron from distant Hispania, each stored in small clay jars with wax-sealed tops. Buyers pause to pinch a sample between their fingers, releasing waves of scent that carry the mind far beyond Rome's walls. A butcher's block nearby rings with the steady chop of a cleaver, the cut meat displayed in clean sections on polished wooden boards. Women from the Subura arrive with baskets on their arms, comparing prices for goat's cheese and dried figs. Their tunics are plain but bright with dyed hems, and their hair is bound in scarves against the dust. Slaves negotiate on behalf of their households, some standing firm, others yielding quickly to avoid a scolding later. In the open lanes between stalls, children dart with sweet cakes bought from a baker's tray, the smell of honey clinging to their fingers. A blind lyre player, seated in the shade of a pillar, sings a soft hymn to Fortuna, his voice carrying just above the bargaining hum. From the edge of the square comes the slow creak of a laden cart, arriving with more amphorae of wine, the red wax seals gleaming in the sun. As the hour lengthens, the press of bodies grows. The market is a living artery, pumping goods, news, and gossip through the city. Here, in the space between temple steps and the shade of the porticoes, Rome's appetite is fed. Not just for food, but for the endless exchange that binds its people together. Just beyond the busiest market lanes, the marble steps of the Temple of Concord rise in quiet contrast to the press and noise below. The air here feels stiller, touched with the faint resinous scent of smouldering incense drifting from bronze braziers at the entrance. Morning light catches on the fluted columns, sending pale reflections across the warm paving stones where worshippers pause before climbing. A priest in a spotless white toga praetexta, its purple border crisp against the fabric, stands near the threshold, murmuring blessings as visitors approach. His assistants, younger acolytes in belted tunics, tend the flames and arrange fresh offerings on low stone tables, baskets of grain, small clay figures, and bowls of milk for the household gods. From a side alcove comes the soft chime of a handbell, signaling the start of a short supplication. Within the dim interior, cool air carries the mingled fragrances of myrrh and laurel. Oil lamps flicker before the central statue, casting soft shadows over the serene features of the deity. A matron kneels, laying a garland of early autumn flowers at the base, her fingers lingering in a brief silent prayer for her family's health under the new emperor's reign. Nearby, a merchant places a small sealed jar of honey. His whispered words are hope for fair trade and safe passage for his ships. Outside, on the broad landing, a soldier home on leave from Britannia leans on his spear while a companion makes his offering, both of them casting occasional glances toward the city below. Their armor catches the sunlight in bright flashes, out of place yet unremarkable in the temple's steady flow of citizens. The temple's steps become a slow-moving threshold between the sacred and the everyday. Worshippers descend back into the marketplace, carrying the faint traces of incense in their hair and clothing, their faces marked by quiet reflection. The soft bell sounds again, its note fading into the more distant calls of vendors as the day in Rome moves forward, commerce and devotion woven together in the city's unbroken rhythm. In a shaded portico near the Basilica Julia, a line of citizens waits beneath painted ceilings, the murmur of their conversations blending with the faint scrape of styluses on wax. Here, the magistrates conduct the steady work of civic order, their benches set behind low wooden rails to separate them from the petitioners. The cool marble floor carries the scent of ink and parchment, mixed with the faint tang of the lime wash on the walls. Aediles in white togas sit with clerks at their sides, reviewing cases brought forward since dawn. One dispute concerns the boundary of two adjoining workshops, another the sale of spoiled grain at an inflated price. The clerks unroll scrolls from neat stacks at their feet, the papyrus crackling as the relevant edicts are found. From time to time, a magistrate raises a hand to halt the flow of words, his signet ring flashing briefly as he points toward a waiting scribe to record the verdict. A small boy, no more than 12, stands nervously before the bench, speaking for his father, who works the river docks. His voice quavers as he explains how a shipment of olive oil was seized in error by customs officers. A magistrate leans forward, expression unreadable, then consults with an aide before issuing an order to release the goods. The boy bows deeply, relief plain on his face, and hurries off through the shaded hall. At another table, city surveyors in short tunics and sandals lay out wax tablets marked with fresh diagrams. Plans for repairing a stretch of the Aqua Marcia aqueduct. The magistrates glance over the figures, tapping their fingers on the polished wood before giving their approval with a quick seal in red ink. From outside comes the echo of sandals in the colonnade, where petitioners shuffle forward as others leave, some satisfied, others muttering under their breath. The soft, steady rustle of scrolls being opened and rolled shut marks the passing of the morning here, justice and administration unfolding in small, deliberate gestures, the city's machinery turning without haste but without pause. South of the Forum, where the marble porticoes give way to narrower streets, the air grows heavier with the scent of hot metal and fresh-cut wood. This is the quarter of craftsmen, and by late morning it is alive with the sharp ring of hammers, the rasp of saws, and the steady beat of mallets shaping raw material into the goods that keep the city clothed, housed, and armed. In a blacksmith's open front shop, a forge glows red at its heart. The master, his bare arms glistening with sweat, grips a length of iron with tongs, laying it across the anvil. Each strike of his hammer sends a bright spray of sparks to the packed dirt floor. His apprentice pumps the bellows in a slow, even rhythm, the rush of air feeding the fire's roar. Hanging from the rafters are finished tools, chisels, hinges, and the curved blades of sickles, ready for market. Across the lane, a potter works at his wheel, the damp clay spinning beneath his skilled hands. The earthy smell of the wet clay mixes with the sharper tang of the smith's smoke. Shelves display rows of amphorae and wide-brimmed bowls, their surfaces drying in the sun before the next firing. A boy runs past, carrying a small jug carefully in both hands, a customer's order for a neighbouring street. Leatherworkers, too, ply their trade here. Strips of hide hang in the open air, softening in the mild warmth. The sound of a knife slicing through thick leather is quick and deliberate. The finished goods, sandals, belts, harness straps, are stacked neatly on low tables. A customer tests the fit of a sandal, walking a few steps while the craftsman watches critically. Small knots of workers trade news between shops, the price of olive oil rising again, a rumour that a shipment of fine marble from Proconnesus has been delayed, and word of new building, works the emperor may soon commission. Above it all, the shouts of vendors drift in from a nearby cross street, where food stalls serve bread, cheese, and watered wine to hungry labourers. Here, away from the marble grandeur, the city's pulse is measured in the clink of tools, the hiss of quenched metal, and the knowledge that every strike, cut, and turn of the wheel builds the daily life of Rome as surely as any decree from the Palatine. From the bustle of the craftsmen's streets, the slope of the Palatine Hill rises in quiet dignity. By late morning, a procession moves upward along its paved road, the measured thump of a small drum keeping time for the column. At the head rides a mounted courier in a dark dyed cloak, its hem edged with a narrow silver braid. Behind him walk a half-dozen envoys from the provinces, their garments marking them as men from far-off corners of the empire. A long, fur-trimmed cloak from Dacia, a loose draped himation in the Greek style, a belt worked with knot patterns from Britannia. Slaves carrying cedar chests follow close, the polished wood banded with bronze. Their contents are hidden, but the weight in the porter's shoulders suggests scrolls, fine textiles, and perhaps gifts for the emperor himself. 2 guards in polished segmentata armor flank the line, their spears upright, bronze fittings catching in the sun. The road is lined here with villas, their gates set back from the street behind marble columns and flowering shrubs. At several gates, household staff pause their sweeping or watering to watch the column pass. A boy in a plain tunic, clutching a wax tablet, whispers to a sister about the foreigner's strange clothing. As they climb, the sounds of the city grow more distant, replaced by the softer rustle of leaves and the cooing of doves from the gardens above. The imperial residence comes into view. Walls of pale stone, roof tiles gleaming deep red, and porticoes that frame the sky beyond. Attendants stand at the great bronze doors, and the air here is touched with the scent of cedar oil and laurel from freshly swept floors. At the threshold, the drum falls silent. The envoys adjust their garments, and the guards step aside. They will wait in the shaded forecourt until the proper chamberlains summon them within. For now, the Palatine absorbs their arrival into its calm order, another thread in the Empire's web of voices, reaching the Emperor's ear before the day is done. By midday, the sun settles high and steady over Rome, its warmth softening the edges of shadow beneath cypress and laurel. In the gardens of Sallust, the air holds a still, drowsy quality broken only by the steady chirr of cicadas in the branches. These sprawling grounds, once the private retreat of a historian and later taken into imperial keeping, are open to senators, favored guests, and those of means who seek respite from the city's denser quarters. Gravel paths wind through terraces of clipped box hedges and marble statuary. A gentle slope leads to a reflecting pool, where the surface mirrors the white curve of a nearby pavilion roof and the slow glide of a single swan. The scent of rosemary drifts from planted beds, mingling with that of ripening figs heavy on their branches. In the shaded colonnade, a pair of poets recite verses to a small gathering. Their voices, unhurried, rise and fall in a cadence meant to match the slow rhythm of the garden's fountains. Listeners sit on low benches of stone, some fanning themselves with folded palm fronds, others sipping diluted wine brought by attentive slaves from wicker baskets. A senator in a pale linen tunic strolls the path with a visiting Greek philosopher, their quiet debate touching on the nature of justice in times of peace. Now and then they pause beneath the shade of an olive tree, the senator gesturing with one hand toward the city skyline beyond the garden walls, the glint of the Tiber, the pale sweep of the forum's temples. Closer to the gates, a noblewoman walks with 2 attendants, her stola of soft saffron gauze lifting in the warm breeze. She carries a small posy of violets, gathered from a shaded bed near the fountain, inhaling their scent as if to draw the moment deeper into her memory. Beyond the walls, the roar of midday commerce continues. But here, the day is suspended in a gentler current. The gardens absorb the heat and light, holding them in stillness, offering a space where the Empire's business pauses for the length of a conversation, a poem, or the slow turning of a gravel path. Near the Circus Maximus, the air vibrates faintly with the sounds of preparation. Long before the crowds arrive, teams of workers move through the open tiers of seating, sweeping away dust and debris left by wind and wandering animals overnight. The great arena stretches before them, an elongated oval of packed sand, its central spina lined with obelisks and statues that cast short, sharp shadows under the midday sun. From the far end comes the creak of wooden gates as carpenters test their hinges, ensuring the starting stalls for the chariots will swing open smoothly. Their hammers ring briefly, then pause as a foreman calls out instructions. The scent of fresh-cut timber mixes with the faint, sharp odor of oiled leather from the chariots themselves, stored nearby and now being rolled into position for inspection. Animal handlers lead pairs of glossy horses along the inner track, their hooves muffled in the sand. The animal's breath huffs in the heat, ears flicking at the distant sounds of other beasts being moved. Big cats in reinforced cages, their low growls carrying on the breeze from the far side of the stadium. These are destined not for races, but for the spectacles between events, where they will be shown off to the crowd's delight. Vendors set up small stalls outside the main gates. Large clay pots of spiced wine are readied, their rims already sticky from testing, and trays of sausages sizzle over low charcoal braziers, sending thin threads of smoke upward. A boy in a tunic too large for him rushes between stalls carrying bundles of fresh bread, the crust still warm from the oven. From the higher seating tiers, a few early spectators lean on the stone balustrade to watch the workers below, the view of the track empty yet filled with promise. In the distance, a cheer rises from a group of youths practicing with hobby chariots in an open lot. The sound drifting down to the stadium like a faint echo of the noise that will fill it by evening. The preparations are as much a performance as the games themselves, each stroke of a broom, each tightened harness a part of the ritual that keeps Rome's appetite for bread and spectacle fed, day after day, under the gaze of emperors and commoners alike. In a crowded insula on the Capitoline Hill, midday brings a pause to the steady shuffle of feet on the stairwells. The air inside is warm, heavy with the mingled scents of cooking oil, drying laundry, and the faint tang of damp plaster. From a small upper-floor apartment, the sound of cutlery on clay dishes drifts into the hallway, accompanied by the low murmur of voices. Here, a family of 5 gathers around a simple wooden table, its surface scarred from years of use. The father, a leather worker from the nearby craftsman's quarter, has returned briefly from his shop. His hands, still marked with traces of dye, gesture animatedly as he recounts a conversation with a fellow artisan about a possible commission from a wealthy household. His wife ladles lentil stew into shallow bowls, the steam carrying the earthy scent of garlic and herbs. A loaf of bread, bought earlier from a street vendor, rests in the center of the table. Its crust is torn by hand, passed from one to another with a casual ease born of habit. The children, their tunics patched in places, dip pieces into the stew. Their chatter, a blend of market gossip, overheard that morning, and tales from their lessons at the local grammar school. Through the open window, sunlight slants in at an angle, warming a sill where a small pot of basil grows, its leaves stirring in the occasional breeze. The sounds of other households filter in. The scrape of a chair, the sudden clink of a dropped cup, a burst of laughter from somewhere 2 floors below. In the corridor outside, a neighbor carrying a basket of figs pauses to exchange greetings. She leaves 3 on the table in return for a promise of help later with a leaky water jar. The exchange is quick, unceremonious, but marked with the easy interdependence that binds the residents of these tall, narrow buildings. The meal is brief. Soon the father will return to his bench, and the children will run errands in the market streets. But for this moment, in the dim, close air of the apartment, the noise of Rome is muted, and the simple comfort of shared food steadies the middle of the day. As the sun tilts westward, the Forum has shed the softer pace of morning. The shadows of its columns lie shorter now, and the air rings with sharper voices. Merchants finalizing deals, petitioners pressing their cases, and in several shaded corners, groups gathered in earnest discussion. Here, under the long colonnade of the Basilica Aemilia, a knot of philosophers and jurists stand in a loose circle, the folds of their togas shifting as they gesture and counter. The scent of warmed stone rises from the paving beneath their sandals. Passers-by slow, drawn by the rhythm of their exchange. One speaker, a bearded man with the deep tan of someone long in the provinces, holds forth on the limits of imperial expansion, quoting both Cicero and a recent decree of Hadrian. Another, younger and more severe in manner, argues that peace on the borders will sap Rome's strength, turning citizens toward idleness. Murmurs ripple through the onlookers. A few nod thoughtfully, others shake their heads. Just beyond them, near the steps of the Temple of Saturn, a smaller group listens to a rhetorician testing the cadence of a speech. His voice rises in deliberate waves, each phrase landing on the warm afternoon air with a practiced finality. Two scribes stand nearby, their styluses hovering over wax tablets to capture notable turns of phrase for later study. The smells of the forum shift as the breeze changes. Roasting meat from a nearby vendor mingles with the sharper scent of ink and parchment from a scribe's stall. In the open space, pigeons flutter up suddenly as a pair of soldiers pass through, their armor glinting in the light, spathae at their hips. They do not pause, but their presence leaves a momentary hush in their wake. Farther along, under the shadow of the rostra, an older man in a plain tunic tells a small cluster of listeners about Hadrian's recent audience with provincial envoys. His voice is lower, more intimate, meant to convey that these are details not yet common knowledge. Heads lean closer, the circle tightening. In the forum, debate is as constant as trade. Words here carry weight, not only in law, but in the shifting opinions that ripple outward through the city like rings across a sunlit fountain. From the northern approach to the forum, the clatter of iron-shod hooves on stone announces a new arrival. The crowd parts in slow curiosity as a mounted guard appears, flanking a small but richly dressed procession. At its center walk the foreign envoys who reached the Palatine earlier in the day, now making their way toward the Curia for a formal introduction to selected senators. Their garments mark them as strangers to the city's everyday fashion. One man from Mauritania wears a deep indigo robe, the dye so rich it almost shimmers in the sun, its hem embroidered with fine geometric patterns in gold thread. Beside him, an envoy from the Nabatean lands has a headcloth bound with braided cord, the ends falling down his back, the cloth itself faintly scented with myrrh. A third, from the Greek islands, wears a pale chiton under a finely worked cloak, clasped with a bronze pin shaped like a dolphin. Between them, slaves carry gifts in covered baskets, jars of perfumed oil, rolls of silk, and small carved ivories. The guards' polished helmets and upright spears give the column a steady frame, their measured pace keeping the attention of all who line the route. Children push forward for a better view, some whispering guesses about the contents of the baskets, others marveling at the bright fabrics. Vendors take advantage of the pause, stepping forward with trays of figs or small cups of watered wine, hoping to catch a coin from a curious bystander. The mingled smells of the marketplace, spices, fresh bread, leather, swirl in the wake of the passing column. As they near the Curia's broad steps, the envoys glance upward at its massive doors, flanked by statues of past leaders. A senator's aide emerges, his toga arranged in immaculate folds to greet them and usher the group inside. The great doors swing shut behind, their bronze surfaces catching the late afternoon light for a moment before returning to shadow. For those outside, the scene lingers only as a ripple in the forum's constant motion. Another quiet reminder that Rome's reach extends far beyond the hills and gates that contain its daily life. Inside the Curia Julia, the cool air carries the faint mineral scent of marble and the dry musk of parchment. Light filters in from high windows, striking the rows of wooden benches where senators in white togas praetextae take their seats. The soft murmur of conversation rolls beneath the vaulted ceiling, punctuated by the scrape of a chair or the shuffle of sandals on stone. At the center, on a raised platform, the presiding consul sits with a pair of scribes at his side. A clerk unrolls a scroll and begins to read the day's agenda. updates on provincial taxation, the allocation of funds for aqueduct repairs, and the reception of gifts from the foreign envoys now waiting in an antechamber. The topics move from practical to ceremonial, but all are delivered with the same measured tone, each item entered into the record by a waiting secretary. The voices rise when the matter of the army's deployment is raised. One senator, grey-haired and broad-shouldered, speaks in favor of Hadrian's policy to reinforce borders rather than press further into hostile territories. He gestures broadly toward the chamber's high walls as though to indicate the limits of Rome's reach. Another counters sharply, warning that complacency invites weakness, his hand slicing the air in emphasis. The low hum of side conversation swells until the consul raps the floor with his staff, restoring order. A messenger in a short, belted tunic slips in through a side door, kneels and delivers a sealed tablet to the consul. Its contents are not read aloud, but the consul's brow furrows briefly before he sets it aside. Discussion moves on to civic works. A new temple restoration, proposed statues, honoring past emperors, and here the tone softens, replaced by nods and murmurs of agreement. From beyond the thick doors comes the muffled echo of the forum, a reminder that the city moves on while its leaders deliberate within. By the time the meeting adjourns, the light has shifted, and long beams of gold cut across the chamber's floor. Senators rise, adjusting the folds of their togas, their voices once again mingling into a steady, dignified murmur as they step out into the late afternoon sun. Southwest of the Colosseum, in a walled training yard, the afternoon air carries the scent of sand, sweat, and oiled leather. The Ludus Magnus, Rome's largest gladiator school, hums with disciplined motion. Rows of fighters in short tunics move across the packed arena floor, wooden swords striking shields in a steady rhythm. Each blow lands with a hollow thud, followed by the grunt of effort and the scuff of sandals shifting for balance. An instructor, broad-chested and scarred, paces between pairs, his voice sharp but measured. He corrects a stance here, adjusts a shield angle there, occasionally demonstrating with a sudden, fluid strike that sends a wooden blade spinning from a pupil's grip. The fighters range in age from fresh recruits to seasoned veterans of the arena, their faces intent beneath the dust and heat. In one corner, two men practice with weighted nets and tridents, circling each other in a slow, deliberate dance. The net snaps outward in a practiced arc, the trident's prongs catching the sun before withdrawing. Nearby, a group of murmillos in heavy helmets jog laps around the yard, the clink of their greaves in time with the thud of feet on sand. A line of slaves works under a shaded awning, repairing gear, stitching leather straps, replacing worn bindings on shields, and polishing the metal edges of helmets. The smell of fresh oil and beeswax drifts from their benches. A bucket of water stands nearby. Fighters pause to drink, splashing their faces before returning to drills. From an upper gallery overlooking the yard, a few onlookers watch the training. One is a merchant, rumored to sponsor promising gladiators, his arms folded as he studies the fighter's form. Another is a young boy, eyes wide, clutching the railing as if imprinting every movement for stories later told in the Subura. The clang of weapons, the shouted commands, the dull thump of bodies hitting the sand, all form a rhythm as steady as any market or senate session. Here, the empire's hunger for spectacle is shaped long before the roar of the arena, in the dust and discipline of a yard hidden behind high walls. Beyond the southern gates, the Via Appia stretches into the haze of the afternoon, its great paving stones warm under the sun. The steady creak of cart axles and the rhythmic clop of hooves fill the air, mingling with the distant calls of drivers urging their animals onward. Dust rises in soft clouds behind passing traffic. settling on the leaves of roadside olive trees and on the sandals of travelers making their way toward the city. Merchants lead mules laden with baskets of late-season grapes, the sweet ripening scent trailing in their wake. A wagon piled high with amphorae of wine rolls slowly toward the gates, each jar cushioned in straw and stamped with the mark of its vineyard. Alongside, a small band of soldiers returns from duty at a nearby posting station, their armor dulled by the road but their steps still orderly. On the verges, shrines to household and roadside gods stand beneath weathered canopies. Some are freshly garlanded with flowers, others bear the soot marks of recent offerings. A woman in a russet stola pauses at one, pouring a libation of wine onto the earth before continuing on with her empty jug. The faint fragrance lingers briefly, caught in the breeze that moves down from the Alban hills. Occasionally, a faster rider overtakes the slower flow. A courier in a short cloak, leather satchel bouncing against his hip, dust streaking his face. He does not slow, his eyes fixed ahead on the next milestone marker. Beyond the main traffic, the road's edges hold quieter scenes. A shepherd guiding a small flock along the grassy verge. A potter from a roadside workshop arranging his wares on a low table for any passing buyer, and children chasing one another in the shade of a tall cypress, their laughter momentarily cutting through the deeper sounds of the road. The Via Appia breathes in a continuous rhythm, goods flowing toward the city, people toward the countryside, each journey a thread in the weave that binds Rome to its provinces. By this hour, the light has begun to soften, casting the long straight stretch ahead in a dusty gold that promises the day is moving toward its slower hours. Closer to the heart of the city, the signs of Hadrian's ambitions take shape in stone and timber. In an open expanse near the Campus Martius, scaffolding climbs against the skeleton of a new public building, its wooden poles lashed tight with hemp rope. The air is sharp with the scent of freshly cut pine and the chalky dust of quarried marble. Sunlight flashes on the polished edges of tools as masons chip and smooth each block, the tap-tap of their chisels carrying across the site in an uneven rhythm. Carpenters work beside them, sawing planks for temporary walkways and hoisting beams into place with block and tackle rigs that creak under the strain. A foreman in a short, dark tunic calls out instructions from the shade of a half-finished arch, his voice competing with the rumble of stone being dragged on sledges from a nearby storage yard. Young apprentices dart between crews, carrying water jugs or fetching baskets of iron nails, their bare felt quick on the sun-warmed boards. In one corner, a sculptor chips at the beginnings of a decorative frieze. His hands, white with stone dust, move with a patient precision, coaxing out the first outlines of vine leaves that will one day frame the building's entrance. A small crowd of passers-by has gathered just beyond the ropes, craning for a look. Some murmur approval at the scale of the project. Others debate whether the emperor's attention to architecture is a wise use of coin when the legions still guard restless borders. Amid the noise, the smell of pitch from freshly sealed roof tiles mingles with the metallic tang of hammered nails. A wagon arrives from the Tiber docks bearing more marble, the blocks sheened with water from their river journey. Workers unload them with careful shouts and the groan of wooden rollers. Overhead, the sky has taken on a deeper hue, the sharp light of midday softening into the golden tones of late afternoon. The labor continues without pause, a living monument in progress. Each blow of the hammer and scrape of the chisel part of the long conversation between emperor, city, and the centuries yet to come. In the quieter quarter near the theatre of Marcellus, the portico of Octavia offers shade and a gentler murmur than the forum's press. Marble columns, streaked with age, hold up a high roof that funnels the late afternoon light into long dappled bands across the pavement. Here, in the cool shadows, Philosophers and students gather in loose knots, their voices low but intent. Scrolls lie open on stone benches, weighed at the corners with small bronze figurines to keep the pages from curling in the breeze. The smell of old parchment mingles with the faint perfume drifting from a spice seller's stall just beyond the colonnade. Cinnamon, cloves, and dried orange peel carried on the shifting air. One group leans close over a Greek text, the teacher tracing a line with his finger as he recites, the words slow and deliberate. His students listen, some nodding, others scribbling notes on wax tablets balanced against their knees. A little further along, another circle debates the moral duties of leadership, their Latin occasionally giving way to Greek quotations. Passers-by pause to catch a fragment of verse or a clever turn of argument before continuing on toward the markets. Children, perhaps waiting for parents in the nearby shops, play quietly between the columns, their sandals slapping softly against the stone. A pair of older men sit apart from the main discussions, speaking in measured tones about Hadrian's fondness for Hellenic learning. They gesture toward a passing youth with a satchel full of scrolls, remarking that the emperor's tastes may yet draw more Greek teachers to Rome. The sounds here are gentle, the faint rasp of parchment as a page is turned, the muffled thud of a staff on stone as an elderly scholar moves from one group to another. Outside the portico, the busier streets carry the sharper noises of carts and vendors, but within its cool embrace, the rhythm slows. Ideas move at the pace of conversation, each word an offering to the shared quiet of the place. As the sun lowers toward the horizon, the bands of light grow longer, and the scrolls are rolled up with care. Students tuck them into satchels, voices dropping further as they step back into the city's broader current. As the day leans toward evening, the markets take on a final surge of movement. Shadows from the porticos stretch across the stalls, but the air is still warm and alive with the scent of ripe fruit, fresh bread, and the faint tang of fish on damp reed mats. Housewives hurry between vendors with baskets slung at their hips, their voices brisk as they press for the last good prices before nightfall. Merchants call out in quick succession, lowering their offers for the day's remaining goods, figs beginning to split at the skin, small wheels of goat cheese wrapped in vine leaves, herbs that will wilt if not sold. The sharp chink of coins passing into hands carries through the hum, punctuated by the soft thump of produce dropped into baskets. Near the grain stalls, slaves queue patiently, amphorae balanced on shoulders or clay jars cradled in their arms, waiting their turn at the scales. A pair of children trail behind an older brother, clutching a few copper asses each, glancing often at a sweet seller, arranging honey cakes in neat rows. The smell of the honey, warm and floral, threads through the heavier scents of the market. At the edges, itinerant craftsmen take advantage of the crowd. A man repairing the strap of a sandal while its owner waits. A woman patching the hem of a tunic with quick, precise stitches. The rasp of her needle through cloth is almost lost under the louder bargaining nearby. As the sun dips lower, light catches on the polished bronze pans of the scales, flaring briefly before the shadows reclaim them. Some stalls begin to pack away their goods, wrapping them in cloth or stacking them into baskets for the walk home. Others hold on, hoping for one last customer before the streets thin. The rush is brief but dense, a concentrated current of trade and talk that will ebb as swiftly as it rose. By the time the first torches are lit along the main streets, the market's cries will fade into the softer tones of evening, leaving behind only the scents and dust of a day's commerce. As the marketplace begins to thin, the vigiles, Rome's night watchmen, emerge from their station houses to take up the first rounds of the evening. Their presence is marked by the soft jingle of metal fittings on leather harnesses and the occasional creak of a spear haft shifting against a shoulder. Clad in short tunics with reinforced belts, they wear helmets more practical than ornate, and each carries a small round shield along with a water bucket or hook for fire duty. They move in pairs along the streets, their sandals scuffing softly over the worn paving stones. At each crossroad, one pauses to check the public oil lamps, refilling those whose flames burned low. The smell of warm olive oil drifts faintly as the wick is adjusted and relit. In narrow alleys, they step carefully, eyes flicking toward darkened doorways and the shadows under staircases. Passing an insular courtyard, they exchange greetings with a woman drawing water from the well. She nods toward a leaky gutter spilling onto the paving, and one vigil makes a note on a small wax tablet for the ward's maintenance list. In another street, they pause to speak to a pair of tavern keepers setting out benches for the evening trade, reminding them to keep the main walkway clear. From the Subura comes the faint clamor of a dispute. Voices raised in anger. The vigils quicken their pace, the jingle of their gear sharper now. Around the corner, they find two cart drivers shouting over a broken wheel blocking the way. A few measured words, a warning, and the matter subsides into muttering as the men set about moving the cart. As they continue, the glow of torches begins to show in the busier thoroughfares, and the city's sound shifts. Less the clang of trade, more the mingled laughter, music, and talk of citizens settling into the evening. For the vigils, the patrol will last deep into the night, a steady circuit through Rome's wards to keep the city's darker hours as orderly as its day. In the lamplight of a grand domus on the Capitoline Hill, the triclinium glows with warmth and polished colour. Mosaics of dolphins and curling vines spread beneath low couches arranged in a U-shape around a table inlaid with ivory. From the open courtyard beyond drifts the faint perfume of evening flowers, jasmine and rose, mingling with the richer scents of roasted game and spiced wine. Guests recline on cushions, their togas arranged in careful folds, attended by slaves who move with quiet efficiency. A lyre's gentle notes thread through the air, played by a musician seated near the doorway, the melody low enough not to intrude on conversation. The host, a senator with silver at his temples, gestures toward a platter of fresh oysters arranged on a bed of seaweed, the brine scent sharp against the backdrop of roasting meat. The courses arrive in sequence: olives steeped in herbs, bread warm from the oven, and a salad of endive dressed with honey and vinegar. A servant pours wine from a painted amphora, mixing it with cool water from a silver jug before filling each cup. The main dish follows: a roasted pheasant with a crust of crushed pepper and coriander, steam curling upward as it is carved. Conversation moves easily between topics: the morning Senate session, the arrival of foreign envoys, and the latest rumors about the emperor's plans for new building works. Laughter rises when a guest recounts a small mishap during the afternoon races of a private villa. A chariot wheel flying free to the horror and delight of the assembled. Between courses, figs and dates are offered on small trays, their sweetness cutting the savory richness of the meal. The lamplight flickers gently on polished bronze cups and the smooth curve of ceramic bowls, each reflection dancing with the music. As the evening deepens, the pace slows. Guests settle further into their couches, sipping wine, their voices softer now. In the garden, the night air grows cooler, and the rustle of leaves beyond the walls offers a faint counterpoint to the lyre's final, lingering chords. Across the Tiber, in the lively Transtiberim district, the evening hum is rougher, more boisterous. A tavern near the riverfront has thrown its shutters wide, letting out the glow of oil lamps and the mingled scents of smoke, stewed lentils, and sour wine. The low ceiling traps the warmth of bodies and conversation, while the uneven stone floor bears the scuff marks of countless boots and sandals. Inside, long wooden tables are packed with labourers, sailors, and carters, their tunics dusty from the day's work, clay mugs knocked together in quick toasts, the sharp tang of cheap wine cutting through the heavier aromas of bread and garlic. A boy weaves between benches with a tray of steaming bowls, his bare feet nimble on the worn flagstones. Each dish is simple but hearty, beans thickened with barley, salted fish, hunks of coarse bread. At one table, a group of dockworkers hunch close, speaking over the background din about a grain barge delayed upriver. At another, two men cast knucklebones, the small clatter of each throw followed by muttered curses or sharp laughs. A woman in a faded red shawl moves among the patrons, offering figs from a woven basket for a coin or two. From a corner, a musician plucks a small cithara, his melody half swallowed by the room's rising volume. Now and then, a burst of song erupts from a table, the voices loud and slightly off-key, but full of good humour. Near the doorway, a pair of vigiles pause for a drink, their spears resting against the wall as they exchange quick words with the innkeeper. The air is thick, the light low, the sounds of the river outside just a faint undercurrent beneath the noise within. Here, the empire's vastness feels far away. The concerns are the next cup, the next hand of dice, the brief comfort of warm food after a long day. By the time the moon rises over the river, the tavern will still be awake, its laughter spilling into the narrow streets. From the broad steps of the Temple of Jupiter, Optimus Maximus, the city unfolds in the warm hush of sunset. The Capitoline Hill catches the last gold of the day, its temples and porticoes glowing against the deepening blue of the sky. A breeze carries the mingled scents of incense from the shrines and the faint salt tang from the Tiber far below. Citizens linger on the steps, some pausing on their way home from the forum, others simply standing to watch the light fade. The rooftops of the city spread outward in every direction, red tiles bright where they catch the sun, shadowed alleys already folding into night. Beyond the hills, the sky flares with bands of amber and rose before giving way to the first pale stars. Priests in white-bordered togas tend the temple fires, feeding them with handfuls of aromatic resin that crackle softly in the hearths. The smoke curls upward in thin, twisting ribbons, drifting into the open air above the city. A pair of musicians stand near the edge of the terrace, their flutes sending out a low, steady melody that blends with the whisper of the wind between the columns. Below, the forum is still active but gentler now, the loud calls of merchants replaced by the softer movements of those finishing business. The shadows of the great buildings stretch long across the paving stones, intersecting like the lines of an intricate map. On the far bank of the Tiber, the lamps of the Transtiberim begin to flicker to life, their reflections trembling in the slow-moving water. A lone courier, small in the vast sweep of the view, rides along the river road toward the southern gates, his figure outlined in the last light. As the sun dips fully behind the western horizon, the air cools noticeably, carrying a freshness that makes the torch flames at the temple entrance flare and dance. For a moment, all movement on the hill seems to slow, the city holding its breath in the delicate balance between day and night. As darkness gathers over the city, the great semicircle of the Theatre of Marcellus glows with lamplight. The broad arches of its outer wall frame glimpses of richly dressed citizens arriving, their steps quick on the worn stone as they pass under the vaulted entrances. Inside, the tiers of seating rise steeply around the stage, each bench crowded with Romans settling in for the evening's performance. The air hums with the mingled scents of oil lamps, perfumed hair, and the faint tang of wine carried in small cups. Vendors move through the aisles before the performance begins, offering dried fruits wrapped in fig leaves, small honey cakes, and watered wine cooled in earthen jars. The buzz of conversation is constant, greetings exchanged, wagers made on the quality of the actors, murmurs about who occupies the best seats nearest the stage. Tonight's play is a comedy in the old style, with brightly painted masks and quick, exaggerated gestures. The actors stride into the lamplight, their tunics dyed in vivid colors that catch every flicker of the flames. Laughter rises quickly from the crowd as the first lines are delivered with crisp timing, the words bouncing up into the higher tiers. The slap of sandals on the stage and the occasional twang of a lyre punctuate the dialogue. Outside the theatre, the street remains lively. The glow from the entrances spills onto the paving stones, where latecomers hurry past musicians playing for coins. The distant rumble of carts on the main road is softened here, replaced by the sharper bursts of applause that break from the audience within. As the performance moves toward its climax, the actors' voices carry to the very top of the seating, where the night air drifts cool and steady. Stars begin to emerge over the city's rooftops, and from the uppermost rows, the Tiber can be seen as a dark ribbon threading through the lamplight. When the curtain finally falls, applause swells and echoes off the stone, a warm, rolling sound that follows the crowd as they spill back into the night. Laughter still in their voices, the city alive in the glow of its own pleasures. Across the city, as the streets cool and quiet, the focus turns inward to the warmth of home. In the atrium of a modest domus near the forum, a small lararium, the household shrine, is lit with a single oil lamp. Its flame flickers over painted images of the lares and penatas, the protective spirits of family and storeroom. A bronze bowl of fresh fruit rests at the base, alongside a shallow dish with a few drops of wine, offered before the evening meal. The paterfamilias, his tunic belted loosely after the day's work, stands with his wife and children before the shrine. In the stillness, he pours a libation from a clay cup, murmuring a short prayer for the family's health, the safety of absent kin, and favor in the days ahead. The children watch the flame closely, as if the soft sway of light holds the answer to their father's words. Elsewhere, in the cramped upper floor of an insula, a single mother lights a pinch of incense in a clay dish set on a shelf. She whispers thanks for a day's wages earned and prays for enough work to carry her through the week. Below, in a wealthier household's garden, a priestly friend of the family chants a longer blessing at a marble altar, the smoke curling into the branches of an olive tree above. The air in these moments is scented with olive oil, herbs, and the faint resinous tang of burning incense. The only sounds are the soft pop of the lamp's wick and the occasional creak of timbers settling as the night air cools the walls. From outside, muted street noises drift in. A laugh from a passing group, the distant call of a vendor selling the last of his bread, the faint tap of sandals on stone. Within each home, the prayers end quietly, the offerings left in place until morning. The lamp's glow remains, a small steady light marking the boundary between the city's restless life and the intimate peace of the hearth. Night has taken hold, and the main thoroughfares shine in the shifting light of torches mounted on bronze brackets. Their flames ripple in the evening breeze, casting long shadows across the paving stones and glinting off the wet patches where water has been thrown to settle the dust. The smell of smoke lingers in the air, softened by the cooler currents drifting down from the hills. Along the Via Sacra, small groups make their way home, cloaks pulled close against the night air. The murmur of their voices carries easily in the quieter streets, each conversation briefly catching the ear before fading into the rhythm of footsteps. From time to time, a cart rumbles past, its driver hunched low, the wheels thudding over uneven stones. The vigiles pass in pairs, their torches held high, the faint jingle of their belts and weapons a steady counterpoint to the night stillness. They pause at crossroads to check on lamps left burning at shop fronts, leaning in to shield the flames as they adjust wicks. In narrower alleys their light flickers over closed shutters, the occasional gap revealing a glimpse of lamplight within. Street vendors, fewer now, remain at certain corners, one with a pot of spiced wine kept warm over embers, another selling skewers of roasted meat, their scent rich and inviting in the cool air. A stray dog noses near the stalls, rewarded with a tossed scrap before trotting on into the shadows. From a balcony above, music drifts faintly, the plucked strings of a lyre accompanied by a low voice singing a tune meant more for the singer's pleasure than an audience's. The sound lingers in the torchlight as the singer disappears back inside. The city feels both smaller and more mysterious under the moving glow of the flames. The boundaries of light and shadow shift with every gust of wind, and those still abroad walk in and out of them like actors on a stage, each step carrying them deeper into Rome's night. By the deep hours of the night, the vast hum of Rome has faded to a low, steady breath. The streets lie mostly empty, their stone surfaces cooling under the weight of the dark. In the quiet, the drip of a fountain in a small courtyard can be heard from half a street away, its water glinting faintly where torchlight still lingers at a distant corner. Within the insulae, shutters are closed tight, the glow of oil lamps reduced to slivers of light at the edges. The scent of the day's fires, wood smoke, oil, and a faint trace of spiced wine lingers in the air, now mingling with the cooler, cleaner currents that move through the narrow alleys from the hills. Somewhere high above, a night bird calls once, its voice answered faintly from across the rooftops. The vigils continue their rounds, though their footfalls are slow now, more for presence than urgency. At a crossroads, two pause to exchange quiet words, their torches guttering low before being coaxed back to full flame. Farther off, in the forum, the great statues stand sentinel in shadow, their outlines barely visible against the starlit sky. In the Palatine's guarded courtyards, the imperial residence lies still. A single brazier glows near the entrance, its embers pulsing red, watched over by a lone sentry whose gaze shifts between the gates and the distant sweep of the city below. Across the Tiber, the river moves in its slow, unbroken rhythm, its surface a dark mirror reflecting the smallest glimmers of starlight. The water's steady lap against the moorings is joined only by the occasional groan of a wooden hull settling as the tide changes. Rome's breath is deep now, a city at rest, its countless voices fallen silent until dawn. The day's dust has settled, its labours and pleasures tucked away behind walls and under roofs. Soon the cycle will turn again. The grain will arrive, the ovens will be lit, the forum will stir. But for now, the city lies in the embrace of the night, vast, silent, and at peace.